In this program, we have a conversation with Ken Roseboro. Now, he's been called the nation's reporter on all issues surrounding genetically modified foods. He's written extensively about GM foods and the non-GMO trend since, well, the 1990s. His articles have appeared in many publications, and he is considered a leading authority on all things GMO. So let's join Ken and Alain now and find out why we should be aware how GMOs are affecting our lives and health and the lives of those we love.
Good morning, Ken, and welcome to the Low Carb Paleo Show.
Glad to be here, Alain.
And good morning, Mark. How are you?
Wonderful, thank you. Wonderful. How about yourself?
I am still alive, so I guess that's good.
Okay, you haven't been poisoned by GMOs yet then?
No, not quite. No, I'm working on eliminating GMOs.
Okay, let's get on with that good job.
All right. So, Ken, you and I have been following each other on LinkedIn and Twitter and so on because we have a common interest in organic food, and both of us are anti-GMOs and write on the subject. So, can you tell us, before we get into the core of the subject, can you tell us about your background and how you got where you are now?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I've been covering the genetically engineered food issue since 1999. My background is in journalism, and I was a freelance writer, and then because I live in Iowa, I somehow got directed into writing about agriculture, and soon I was covering the GMO issue, and then I worked for a company in Fairfield called Genetic ID. It's a company that does GMO testing. They test foods for genetically engineered ingredients, and I was writing articles about their testing services. This was back in 2000, and then at that time I saw a non-GMO market emerging. People wanted non-GMO foods because of the concerns around GMOs. This is particularly strong in Europe, as you both probably realize. But it was also kind of a growing, also to a certain extent, in the U.S. So around 2000, I decided to launch a publication focusing on non-GMO and the market for non-GMO foods, grains, ingredients, and also wanted to cover the GMO issue and the concerns around GMOs. So I've been doing this since 2001 is when I launched the publication, our Organic and Non-GMO Report. And we also have a directory called the Non-GMO Sourcebook. It's the only directory of its kind. It's a directory of suppliers of non-GMO seeds, grains, ingredients, and food products. So we have those two publications and a website, and we're on Facebook and Twitter. So we're just trying to educate people about this issue and to support the growing non-GMO market.
Right. I understand that you and I are fellow writers. Can you tell us about your books?
Yeah, sure. I've published, I've written two books. One is called Genetically Altered Foods in Your Health. And I wrote this for Basic Health Publications it came out in 2004. And it's an introductory guide. It's about 100 pages. I tried to make it very easy to understand because the issue of genetically engineered foods can get complex. So I try to make it easy to digest for people, so to speak. And then another book I wrote was the Organic Food Handbook, which was a guide to organic foods, kind of an organic 101 that covers what organic foods are, the certification process, the health and environmental benefits of organic foods. So I've written those two books so far.
How do you think GMOs are affecting our health and environment?
Well, with our health, I would say because there's not a lot of safety testing going on, it's kind of hard to tell. I mean, there could be related to a wide range of health issues. I've heard there could be links with things like autism, um, stomach problems. Um, the problem is there's not a whole lot of there's not any studies being done looking at the impacts of GMOs on human health. And that's because there's very little funding for it. The universities in the US won't touch that type of research because a lot of the universities, the agricultural universities, are getting funding from Monsanto. So they have no interest in making their corporate sponsors look bad. And also the scientists that do this type of research tend to be intimidated from doing it. They're often harassed and intimidated, so they figure, why should I do this type of research? So we really need studies looking at human health impacts. There have been some studies that have shown some alarming results. You're familiar with Professor Seralini's study that was done in France at the University of Caen that found some negative impacts on rats that were fed GMO corn over a 2-year period. It was the first, to my understanding, long-term feeding study of a GMO product, and it showed some alarming results. But as with other studies that come out showing negative impacts, the biotech industry attacked the study. They forced the journal that published it to retract it. It was retracted for reasons that are not usually given for retracting a study. So
right, but it was reinstated recently, right?
Yeah, it was republished by another journal. I forget what that journal was, but yeah, a few months ago it was republished.
Right. And on the good news side, speaking about studies, I just read a couple of days ago that there's a major international studies on GMOs and pesticides starting in London next month in November.
Right.
Do you think that's a good thing?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I believe there's going to be a major announcement made on November 11th about that. It's a $25 million study. So they've got significant funding, and so that'll be very interesting to watch what comes out of that.
Right.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing that should be done. I mean, that's what I mean. The U.S. government should be doing that type of research, but they don't require it. There's no required safety testing of GMO foods, and so.
Well, you know why, right?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah,
Why?
it's okay. On this show, you can say it.
Why is that? Why is it like that?
Well, because the industry has so much influence on the government, I would say. There's the famous cases of the revolving doors where people that work in industry go to work for the FDA or the USDA, and they kind of grease the wheels, so to speak, for industry to get what they want. So yeah, that's why the government just gives the corporations whatever they want, basically.
Well, it's a known fact that the government has been behind the whole GMO thing, as in supporting it since Reagan, right?
Yeah, they have. And I mean, they even promote it overseas. The U.S. government, in their embassies and their USDA foreign offices, are actively pushing, I would say, GMOs in other countries, and threatening to punish countries that don't want GMOs. So they're being being the bully on the block as far as promoting GMOs overseas.
So going back to the effects on the environment, my understanding, I'm not a farmer, and you probably know a lot more about it than I do, is that growing GM crops actually affects the health of the whole environment, the grounds it lives in. I mean, all the biomass and all that. So can you expand on that? Can you tell us more?
Yeah, there have been some studies showing how the BT crops have a negative impact on the soil organisms, the soil microorganisms that are so beneficial for producing healthy plants. Organic farmers encourage the growth of these microorganisms in the soil because they're very health supporting. They produce healthy plants. So there have been some studies that have found that the BT plants have had negative impacts on some of these soil microorganisms. The big problem with the GMO crops is that, particularly the herbicide tolerant GMO crops, the Roundup Ready crops, is that they're being doused with large volumes of glyphosate herbicide, which has negative impacts on the soil and on our health. There's been studies coming out showing negative impacts of glyphosate on human health. And I've been hearing that because weeds are becoming resistant to Roundup, which is a natural occurrence when farmers are using so much Roundup that weeds eventually develop resistance. They're using so much Roundup that it's seeping into our food, and again could be causing lots of health problems. But this again, the studies need to be done to. In fact, there was a small study that was done that found they tested the milk of pregnant women, and they found glyphosate in mother's breast milk. A very disturbing finding.
So basically, as consumers, we're getting hit on both the pesticides is inside the food, like BT corn, and also the fact that because of super weeds and super bugs, farmers are forced to spray 2-3 times as much glyphosate as they used to, which is good for business for Monsanto, but it's not very good for the health of our children, is it?
No, it's not. No. Yeah, using more and more pesticides, more and more glyphosate. And now, because of the weed resistance issue, the biotech industry's solution is to introduce a new generation of GMO herbicide-tolerant crops that are tolerant to 2,4-D herbicide, which is much more toxic than glyphosate. And it's linked to a lot of human health issues, and also environmental damage. 2,4-D is known to drift. It turns from a liquid to a gas, and it can drift for miles and kill other crops. I live in Iowa, and Iowa was once one of the leading grape-producing states in the United States. There were many vineyards in Iowa until the introduction of 2,4-D. And when they introduced 2,4-D and it started drifting, it wiped out the grapes here in Iowa. It was a major reason for destroying the grape production here in Iowa.
Isn't it the fact that the 2,4-D is the kind of cousin to Agent Orange?
Yeah, 2,4-D is one of the ingredients in Agent Orange. There's another ingredient, I forget exactly, it has a similar type of 2,4-T something or other. That was the one that had the dioxins. They said, the pro-biotech lobby says that was the problem. That was the one that caused the problems with Agent Orange. But I just spoke with Ray Seidler, who was a senior scientist at the EPA, he's now retired, who said that 2,4-D also could contain dioxins as well. With the approval of these new 2,4-D crops and the herbicide, the Enlist Duo herbicide that the EPA just approved, the amount of 2,4-D that's going to be sprayed on farmland is going to increase from 2 to 7 times. There's going to be millions of more pounds of 2,4-D sprayed. And it's going to be mixed with glyphosate. It's a mix of the two. And there could be synergistic effects of those two herbicides.
To make it even more dangerous, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
But what upsets me about this issue is that the FDA has received more than 250,000 letters or protests from people, and they still decided to approve it. How does that happen?
Again, it's the corporate influence. Yeah, there was more, I believe there was close to 1 million people sent comments to the EPA about this herbicide, and the USDA was flooded with comments when they approved, before they approved the 2,4-D resistant crops. But they're obviously, as Gary Hirschberg of Stonyfield Farm said, the EPA is catering to the interest of the industry and ignoring the concerns of the American people.
Right.
Unfortunately, that's the situation.
So when are the pitchforks coming out?
Wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, one interesting thing about the 2,4-D resistant GMO crops is that they haven't been approved in China.
No.
And you may have been reading about Syngenta. Syngenta introduced a GMO corn that U.S. farmers have grown for the past couple of years. It wasn't approved in China, and over the past year, China has rejected more than $1 billion in U.S. corn exports to China, and now Syngenta is getting sued left and right by Cargill and farm groups because of this rejection problem and all their lost corn exports. So Dow should look at this and say, Syngenta's having this problem. We shouldn't introduce this corn without Chinese approval. And who knows if China will even approve it. So that's another obstacle to this 2,4-D crop and herbicide. Plus, there's lawsuits to stop it now too.
Yeah, it comes down again to the market deciding. So if countries all over the world refuse to buy genetically engineered crops, the farmers will say, wait a minute. We obviously cannot continue to produce a product that nobody wants, but the Americans, because we still don't have laws on labeling, so they will eventually start to switch back to regular corn or to survive or to sue, which is not necessarily the best solution, but at least it sends a strong message to the corporation that even the farmers are not on their side anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, farmers are suing Syngenta, for selling this GMO corn that was not approved. So yeah, the market, like you said, the market can decide these issues.
So speaking of labeling, what is your opinion on the success of GMO labeling campaigns in Oregon and Colorado?
Well, the big food and chemical companies they've spent more than $30 million in those two states. It's over $16 million in Oregon and over $14 million in Colorado, I believe, or maybe 16. And in Oregon, they have a better chance because Oregon, the organizers of the pro-labeling groups have raised close to $7 million to counteract the misinformation campaign. But in Oregon, they're doing the same thing they did. The opposition is doing the same thing they did in California and Washington. They're flooding the airwaves with negative ads, misleading ads that are basically have lies in them, and they're sending mailings out to people. And as a result, support has eroded, according to the polls. There was a poll that came out yesterday that showed that support for it's called Measure 92 in Oregon has gone down. They were leading 48 to 42, and the latest poll shows that is reversed. So now the no campaign is winning 48 to 42. So they have a tough battle. In Colorado just the supporters there just don't have the money. They have maybe $500,000. So they're being outspent 22 to 1. basically. So they can barely put a TV ad on to counter the message.
Oregon has a strong history of supporting organics, and they already passed some laws banning GMO growing in certain part of the state, right?
Yeah.
So they're more likely to be, cross our fingers, more likely to pass. I guess Vermont at this time is the only one that's really officially passed a labeling law, right, on GMOs.
Yeah, Vermont, well, Connecticut and Maine also passed laws last year in 2013, but these laws have what's called a trigger clause, meaning that the law won't take effect until several other states around them pass similar laws. So their laws depend on like New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Vermont also passing laws. Yeah, Vermont was the first state to pass a law and say, this is going to become law.
Right,
And as a result, they're getting sued. They're getting sued by the Grocery Manufacturers Association to stop it.
It's like, I mean, really, I guess the voices of people doesn't count anymore in this country. The voice of corporation is more powerful.
That's what it would seem like. We wonder, I wonder if our democracy is a democracy in name only because of the corporate interests have so much sway on the government and everything.
Seems that nowadays we live in a corporatocracy and not a democracy.
Exactly, corporatocracy. Yeah.
So going back on the organic issues, what is your impression on the USDA trying to water down the organic standards?
Well, there's concerns. Supporters of organic food that the National Organic Program has gotten weaker. That there's efforts to weaken the power of the National Organic Standards Board. The National Organic Standards Board is made up of individuals, including farmers. There's a farmer from Fairfield, Iowa, where I live, who's on the National Organic Standards Board. And there's efforts to weaken their ability to recommend rules to the National Organic Program, that the National Organic Program would just institute rulemaking without the influence of the National Organic Standards Board. So there's a battle over, the organic rules, and it's been an ongoing battle ever since the National Organic Program rules were introduced back in 2002. There's been attempts by corporations to weaken the rules. There's been an attempt by a congressman from Georgia to weaken the rule on organic feed just for the benefit of one of his constituents who wanted to sell organic poultry. So it's an ongoing battle, and that's why groups like the Cornucopia Institute and the Organic Consumers Association are organic watchdogs to try to maintain the integrity of organic foods. Unfortunately, there are companies, good organic food companies out there like Nature's Path, Lundberg Family Farms, and others that are really committed to maintaining the integrity of the rules. So fortunately, I think these groups and also the company should be able to put up a good fight to maintain the integrity of the rules.
Right. Besides, it's a known fact that Secretary Vilsack, what's his name? Vilsack. He's a very pro-GMO, a strong supporter of genetically engineered crops as well. So he's not the best qualified to try to influence the organic board, right?
Right. Yeah. Vilsack was the governor of Iowa, and he was very pro-GMO. In fact, he got an award from the biotech industry as the governor of the year. So that shows where his interest is.
Yeah,
But the
well,
USDA, it's interesting because the organic farming and food movement is growing significantly. And I mean, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry right now. So the USDA has to recognize that, and they're providing support, some funding. I mean, it's minuscule to what the biotech industry gets for organic programs, to develop organic seed and to develop local food initiatives. So there are some things I would say that they are doing to support organics.
well, it's the old situation of if you can beat them, join them. So the industry sees they can't beat the organic, and as more and more genetically crops or monocrops are created, people like the consumers are buying more and more organic. So they see, well, wait a minute, we need to start getting our hands into the organic business.
Right.
So in order to get that, they're trying to weaken it so they can sneak in and then get to the pole of gold, right?
Yeah. I mean, well, I think what the big companies are trying to do right now, the food companies anyway, is that, like you said, they want a piece of the profitable organic pie. For example, General Mills just spent almost $1 billion to buy Annie's organic company. The big retailers, Walmart is going to sell organic food products. And I mean, even an executive from McDonald's last week, McDonald's released their earnings and they're down 30% in the last quarter. So they're talking about introducing some organic products. So with these huge these huge corporations wanting a piece of organic, trying to keep the rules, the organic rules, maintain the integrity is really going to be a battle, I think.
To all our listeners, we need to be behind that fight and support these organisms, to keep our food clean and healthy.
Yeah.
Where do you see the non-GMO movement in a few years?
I think it's just going to keep growing. It's growing tremendously right now. I mean, with the non-GMO project verified label, the number of companies that have that label is now it's about 22,000 products that now have that non-GMO project seal. And it's gone from basically, the sales have gone from zero in 2009 to it's over $8 billion now a year in sales, non-GMO verified sales. So that's an indication that people are becoming aware of this GMO issue. I think that's one of the big things, the pluses about the non-GMO verified seal, non-GMO project verified seal, because it's raising awareness of the GMO issue. And so I think that's just going to continue growing, and as in the organic world, with these big companies getting involved, they're also getting involved in being non-GMO verified. For example, Post cereals, Post Grape Nuts, which is kind of an iconic cereal brand in the U.S., it's now non-GMO project verified. Cheerios is using non-GMO ingredients, although they did that kind of as a half-baked kind of way.
They're not really non-GMO certified yet.
No, they're not, and they didn't even make an announcement. They just said, "Oh, we still support GMOs, but here's this non-GMO Cheerios for people who want non-GMO." So and with the whole with Chipotle Mexican Grill has made a non-GMO commitment. Ben and Jerry's ice cream. So I think there'll be more companies that are going to be making this non-GMO commitment.
Yeah, there's quite a few companies already on the bandwagon. When I was in charge of the eliminating the GMO products at People's Pharmacy, there's still a lot of resistance from the companies to open the books and say, well, yes, our products are clean. And so my recommendation to my boss was to just stop selling them. But, there's also resistance from the retail side because it's like, well, if we stop selling this product, we'll have nothing left to sell. But somewhere at one point, like Whole Foods did recently, you have to actually declare on which side you are. So Whole Foods claimed that they will be GMO free by 2018, or at least that everything will be labeled accordingly. Right. In your opinion, can you give our listeners ways to avoid GMOs?
Well, the best way is still to buy certified organic. The organic label is still your best bet because the organic rules prohibit the use of GMOs. Avoid the processed foods, the conventional processed foods, because most of those foods will have ingredients from GMO corn or soy or canola or sugar beets. So that's another way to do it. Also, look for the non-GMO Project verified label on products, the little butterfly seal. In fact, I think 50% of the companies that are non-GMO Project verified are also certified organic. So your best way to avoid GMOs is to look for both labels on a product. Right. Yeah, and eating more whole foods instead of processed foods is a simple way.
Fresh food.
Yeah.
Also, buy your food from the local farmers market where you get to know your farmers and get to ask them a lot of questions. Since it's a face-to-face thing, it's not a anonymous corporation out there. You talk directly to your farmer, you're more likely to get a better quality product as well, right?
Exactly. Yeah, buying fresh and local, organic, and also because there aren't any real GMO fruits and vegetables out there now. I mean, there's some papaya in Hawaii that's GMO, but the majority of fruits and vegetables are not GMO.
Right.
So you're still safe with those.
You mentioned testing foods earlier on. How accurate and reliable are those tests?
Well, there's two types of tests. There's one that detects the genetically engineered DNA in a sample. It's called PCR, polymerase chain reaction. That is the most sensitive test because you're detecting the actual genetically engineered DNA. So they can detect up to, I think it's to 0.01% GMO. As the I believe the detection limit is 0.01%. So they can find very small traces. That test can find very small traces of GMOs. The other test, it's a protein test. It detects the protein that's expressed by the genetically engineered DNA. That test, it's a fast test. It's done at grain elevators. Will use this test. The advantage of it is it's quick, and it works similar to a pregnancy test. They take a sample of corn, they'll grind it up and add water, and it's a stick. It's called a strip test, and they'll stick the strip into the sample, and the strip will turn a certain color if it has GMOs, if it tests positive for GMO. So that test it's reliable, but the DNA test is more accurate and more sensitive, I would say.
Do you know which one is used by the non-GMO, and what are their standards as far as what's the upper limit on GMO content?
Well, the non-GMO Project threshold for food is 0.9%, and that's the European standard for labeling. As you all may know, with foods that have to be labeled as GMO in Europe will test over 0.9%. So the non-GMO Project standard for food is 0.9%. often for companies that are going through this non-GMO project verification, they'll use both tests. They'll use the strip test as a quick test to see if there's GMOs, and then they'll use the PCR test to confirm how much, the level of GMO material is in the sample.
Well, sometimes from my experience when I did my research on my book and when I worked at People's Pharmacy, is that when you ask for certification, sometimes they also provide you European certification. Is that valid in America?
I would think it would be. Yeah. I'm not sure if the non-GMO project standard, if what their requirements are, if they would accept that documentation. I would think that they would. If it's if it's certified in Europe, you would think it would be very strict and that would meet the non-GMO project standard.
Yeah, because a lot of these corporations have they have those same products in Europe, so they would use those tests to prove that their products in America are the same, which could be questionable. Yeah. Because as you know, you have as the same exact company that's selling genetically engineered products in this country will sell non-GMO products in Europe.
I know. Yeah, that's one of the big arguments for the people who are supporting labeling. They're saying, well, these big companies are doing this in Europe. Why can't they do it in the U.S.? I don't think they have an argument. I don't think they can dispute that one.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
It's probably due to the fact that in Europe people are very, very close to food, and food is a much more of a cultural issue than it is in this country, and because in Europe people are more close to their food, their farmers, their suppliers, and so on and so forth. So God forbid you don't want to mess with food in European countries because they will raise hell. But Americans seems to be less concerned about what's in their food than Europeans are. Well, how do you explain that?
I think it may be because they're just disconnected from their food. A lot of the agriculture is in the Midwest, and the big population centers are on the coasts. So people just don't have that connection. The majority of the population just does not have that connection to where their food is coming from, I would say. Although I think more people are becoming more aware of this, and I think we're seeing that more awareness growing in the fact that the number of farmers markets is just growing tremendously in the U.S. And so I think people want that type of cultural. More and more people want that type of cultural connection or cultural value that you have in Europe, in being, and appreciating good food and knowing where it comes from, knowing the source and the farmer who grew it. I think that type of value is growing in the U.S.
Yeah, I see a movement in the chefs world of more and more chefs being concerned about the quality of the food they serve to their customers, and so they tend to lead the battle also by buying local from quality sources, and in the process they also educate their customers the same way as you and I educate our followers by writing articles, writing books, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I've read about several chefs, including yourself, that who have strong non-GMO commitments, and there was a chef in Colorado, I forget his name, who has 2 restaurants, and he's just made this strict GMO-free commitment and wants to buy organic ingredients, and it's interesting. I mean, seeing it at the mass scale, what Chipotle is doing. Like they say the Chipotle Mexican grill is just changing fast food. Right. They're growing tremendously, and they make efforts to buy fresh, locally produced foods, and they've made a non-GMO commitment. I spoke with an organic rice farmer in Missouri, the only organic rice farmer in Missouri who's providing organic rice to Chipotle, and so the big fast food companies like McDonald's is seeing Chipotle's success and saying, well, maybe we should do that too, some of that too.
Well, yeah, I mean, Chipotle is growing like crazy, and the McDonald's, sales is dropping, and all the fast food restaurant. The funny part of it is that in the beginning, Chipotle was owned by McDonald's, and I guess they, they didn't see the point, and they sold it back to the owners.
Yeah, right. Yeah, they probably wish they had that one back.
Yes, you could teach him quite a few good lessons.
Yeah,
you mentioned earlier, talking of the different places where people can get organic, non-GMO or maybe organic food. You've got a directory of non-GMO. What exactly does that cover?
It covers mostly the supply chain, the seeds, the grains, non-GMO grains, the ingredients. We designed it originally as a tool for food companies to use, who are looking to source non-GMO products, non-GMO ingredients for their foods. And that's still the primary focus of it. But we've also included, because we're getting a lot of, we started out mainly as a trade publication for the food manufacturers and farmers and like that, but now we're getting more, I would say, just the consumers who are subscribing, who just want to keep up to date on what's happening with GMOs. So with the source book, we've turned it, we're now including lists of companies that are selling, food companies that are selling non-GMO project verified foods as well. So that basically covers the whole food supply chain from seed all the way up to finished food products.
And I understand the non-GMO project has quite an extensive list also on their website, right?
Exactly. Yeah, they do. Yeah, they have a buyer's guide that people can download that they can use there's also an app, an iPhone app. I think there's a couple of these coming out now where people can look up non-GMO project verified products on their iPhone.
So all they have to do is just scan the product at the grocery store, and then the program will tell them whether it contains GMO or not. Yeah,
there are apps like that now. There's one from a company called Fuducate that has, that you can scan. It'll say if it's would have if it's likely to have GMO ingredients or not. Yeah.
I'm going to get a bit macabre now, because a lot of people don't seem to understand how unhealthy GMO foods are. Now, if you are affected by eating GMO foods, exactly what are the effects that you would notice, or maybe not notice until it's too late?
Well, that's one of the problems. I know some people, even scientists, say, well, we didn't know the negative impacts of smoking till 40 years later, after back in the mid 1900s, when just most people were smoking, and the negative impacts didn't show up till years later. So that could be the case. There could be allergic reactions. I know there was a corn variety that was grown back in about 2000. It was called Starlink. It was a genetically modified corn, and it was only supposed to be used for feed use, for animal feed, but they weren't able to segregate it till it was too well, so it got into the food supply, and it got into some corn chips and a bunch of other food products, and several people reported allergic reactions. Food allergic reactions, which can be pretty life-threatening, actually. People go into anaphylactic shock, and several people did report allergic reactions. That's one of the concerns about genetically modified foods on human health, is allergens, because they're introducing novel proteins, novel foods that have never been in the food supply before. So how, people could be allergic to them, and they may not even know it.
Dr. Kaufman has done studies on pig that show that when you feed them genetically engineered food compared to regular corn, side by side, same pigs from the same litter, followed over years, and when they kill both sides, both of them on both sides, they open up their digestive system, and the pigs that were raised on genetically engineered corn show a lot more inflammation in their stomach and digestive system than the pigs raised on regular corn.
Yeah, that was a study that was published last year, and yeah, again, it was a longer term feeding study, and so that's one of the concerns. Also, stomach inflammation. Some people think that there could be the gluten problem could be related to GMOs. So there's a lot of questions that need to be answered through research.
According to Jeffrey Smith, some of that Bt toxin that is into the corn can also transfer into our guts and stay there. And since it is a known antibiotics, it will also affect the health of our probiotics living inside our system, which is our first line of defense. So we are possibly affecting the immune system that way as well.
Yeah, it would be weakening the immune system. Yeah, it could be another negative impact. Yeah.
Well, I've seen the past 10 years, I've been doing nutritional consulting for about 15 years, but past 10 years I've noticed an increase of children with all sorts of food allergies issues and leaky gut syndromes, and not just gluten, but I have kids coming to me with 20, 30, 40 food allergies, which that never existed before. So I suspect that a lot of that has something to do with genetically engineered, because those crops were introduced about 96, 97 in the general public.
Yeah.
So we have a 10 years delay or more, and now it's starting to show up with kids.
One last question. I mean, which are the most common foods that are likely to be contaminated with GMO products?
It would be all the processed foods in the supermarket. Cookies, crackers, everything from salad dressings, cereals. Consumer Reports just did a study. They tested some food products that contain GMOs, high levels of GMOs, including a lot of products that were labeled natural,
Right.
Had high levels of GMOs. There was even a product that claimed to be non-GMO that actually contained GMOs. So you'll find the GMOs, because the primary crops are the GMO crops are corn and soy, cotton, canola, the crops that are grown on millions of acres and that are processed into ingredients and animal feed also. So you find a lot of the GMOs in the processed foods, and also the meats, because the meat, dairy, eggs, because these animals that are raised in conventional systems, conventional farming systems, are being fed GMO corn.
You can also add sugar beet to that.
Yeah.
It's genetically engineered, with sugar is everywhere.
Yeah, the food companies, well, that's a big issue now, is the amount of sugar that the food companies are putting in their products. So, and 50% of the sugar that's produced in the U.S. comes from genetically modified sugar beets.
50%?
50%, yeah. The other 50 comes from sugar cane, which hasn't been genetically engineered yet. But the sugar beets have.
Excellent. Well, there's been a huge amount of information that you've given us, Ken. Thank you very much for that. Is there anything else you think that people should know?
Well, I would just say support the labeling initiatives, become active in this issue, eat healthy, eat organic, non-GMO verified, and just try to raise awareness about this issue with everybody. because the more people know, and the more that more people know, the better it will be in addressing this and getting these things out of our foods.
Super.
Yeah,
and
we
with
need to get
books like Alain's that'll help to educate people. There it is, GMO 101. Recommend everybody get a copy of this to help keep you informed about what GMOs are and how to avoid them. And
I see my role as you see your role is education, and the more we educate people in the potential negative effect of GMO, the better our job is done, and hopefully we can encourage people to get the word out and pass it on to their family, their friends, and everything. So eventually the whole market will start shifting when consumers start buying this stuff.
Yeah, I think that's the key. I think the market is the key. Once the consumers start demanding non-GMO, they want GMOs out, then the food companies are going to have to respond. So, and it could happen quickly.
So can you tell us where we can find information about you and your magazine, your organization?
Sure. We have a website, non-gmoreport.com. That we have a lot of articles on the website going back to 2001 on the health impacts, environmental impacts, the labeling initiatives, non-GMO features on non-GMO companies and individuals. So we have a lot of information there. We have a Facebook page, Organic and Non-GMO Report. We have on that Facebook page we have 577,000 likes now. So we're getting good traffic on that Facebook page. We have a Twitter feed also, Non-GMO Report. So, and we post information, articles on our website and the Facebook page and the Twitter feed also. So it's a good way if you follow us on any of those three outlets, be able to keep up to date on what's happening with this issue.
Thank you very much for all the hard work and obviously the passion to educate people. And thank you for being on the Low Carb Paleo Show. And as we say in Texas, à votre santé, y'all.
Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks again, Ken.
Thank you,
Thank
Mark.
you again.
Alain.
It was great.